in photosynthesis by the plants. So that is primary producer. That is solar energy is transformed into chemical energy by the process of photosynthesis by the plants. Some amount of chemical energy which is used by the plants for their growth, and the remaining is transferred to the consumers by the process of eating. So thus the energy enters the ecosystem through the photosynthesis, and they passes through the different trophic levels or feeding levels. That is here the energy flow. So this energy flow, the main source of energy is the solar energy, that is the sunlight. So in the presence of sunlight, the plants utilize this solar energy and they convert into, they prepare the food materials. That is, they convert into chemical energy. Solar energy converted into chemical energy by the plants. And this is some amount of energy. It is also used by these producers, and remaining is they transfer to the consumers by the process of eating. So here energy enters the ecosystem through the process of photosynthesis, and they pass through the different trophic levels or feeding levels. So here the main source is the sun. So in the presence of solar energy or solar energy, so these producers, they produce the food materials and they are transferred. So while synthesizing and transferring, so some amount of energy which is released in the form of heat. So again, from the producers to the consumers, from the consumers to the decomposers, like this. Again here the after decomposition, so they are present in, they live in the soil, or again this from soil. So the plants again utilize, absorb these nutrients and help, and again it will be transferred. So another function is cycling of the nutrients also. So the flow of energy in an ecosystem which follows the laws of thermodynamics. So here the energy flow in an ecosystem which follows the laws of thermodynamics. So first law of thermodynamics, that is energy neither can be created nor destroyed, but it can be converted from one form to the other. So that is energy, that is the soul. Here in first one, it is converted from one form to other, that is from the solar energy to the chemical energy. So energy for an ecosystem comes from the sun. So it is absorbed by the plants and it is converted into chemical energy, that is solar energy is converted into here chemical energy, and this chemical energy which is utilized by the consumers and transforms into heat. So energy flow in an ecosystem which follows two laws of thermodynamics. The first one is the first law of thermodynamics, energy neither be created and nor destroyed, but it can be converted from one form to other. And second law of thermodynamics, that is whenever energy is transformed, there is a loss of energy through the release of heat. So while transferring from one form to another, some amount of energy is lost in the form of heat. So this is the second law. So here also, during the transfer of energy from one trophic level to another trophic level, some amount of energy is released in the form of heat. So energy is transferred between trophic levels in the form of heat as it moves from one trophic level to the another trophic level. So the loss of energy which takes place through the respiration, work, running or hunting. So here some amount of energy is lost. So here energy flow in an ecosystem which follows two laws of thermodynamics. The first law is that energy neither be created and not destroyed, but it can be converted from one form to another. That is the solar energy is converted into chemical energy. Second law is whenever energy is transformed, there is a loss of energy through the release of heat. So here also, while transferring from one trophic level to another trophic level, so here some amount of energy is lost in the form of heat. So it following two laws. So here the energy flow. So from the sun to plants are producers. So from the plant producers are plants to animals. So while transferring also, here the some amount of energy is lost in the form of heat. So here that is It is also following the 10% law. That is another one is, so the more amount of energy which is present in the producers when compared to the decomposers are tertiary consumers. So because while so here that is after synthesizing the food materials. So here these plants are producers. They can utilize some amount of energy for their metabolic activities, and some of the amount of energy is lost in the form of heat. So while transferring from the plants to animals, when these animals they feed on these plants, so here less amount of energy only transferring from the plants to animals. So here the more amount of energy is present in the plants when compared to the consumers. So next one is the food chains. So here the transfer of energy which is taking place through these food chains. That is, there is a sequence of eating and being eaten in an ecosystem, which is known as the food chain, or transfer of food energy from the plants through the series of organisms, which is called as the food chain. So here the food chain, which always starts with the plant, that is the from the producers, and ends with the animal. So in a food chain, that is in general, it always starts with the plant, that is the producers. After producing, so it will be transferred to the all other organisms. So when the organisms die, they are again all are decomposed by the microorganisms, mainly bacteria and fungi, into the nutrients. So that can be again be used by the plants. So at each and every level, so nearly 80 to 90% of the potential energy gets lost as a heat while transferring from one trophic level to another trophic level, that is from the producer to consumer, primary consumers, and from the primary consumer to secondary consumers. So at each level, nearly 80 to 90% of the potential energy is lost in the form of heat, and only 10% of amount of energy is getting to the uh, consumers, that is from the grass. So for example, here from the grass to grasshopper, so here for example, here the grass contains 100%, but grasshopper they contains only 10% only. So remaining 80 to 90% is lost in the form of heat. Again from this, only 0.01% like that. So in every stage, so some amount of energy, mainly 80 to 90% of energy is lost in the form of heat. So while compared, that is producers, they have the more amount of energy when compared to the tertiary consumer. So another term in ecosystem are the trophic levels, that is the feeding levels. So they are called as the feeding levels or trophic levels. So the various steps through which this food energy which is processed in an ecosystem, which is called as the trophic levels. And the trophic levels are again arranged in the following way, that is the green plants are producers, they represents the first trophic level, that is T1, and herbivores are primary consumers, they represents the second trophic level, that is T2, and carnivores are secondary consumers, represents the third trophic level, and tertiary consumers are the fourth trophic level. And finally, decomposers, they represents the last trophic level. So here the trophic levels are, they are nothing but the feeding levels. So they are the that is the transfer of energy which is taking place. So they are called as the trophic levels. So producers are the first trophic level, like that T1, T2, T3, and T4 and T5. So this is an example of food chain, that is the grass. Here the producer. So from the grass to grasshopper, that is a primary consumer. So here the transfer of energy will be taking place. So again, these food chains are again classified into two main types based on their feeding. So grazing food chain and detritus food chain. So grazing food chain means, so generally it is found in the grassland ecosystem and pond ecosystem. So here the grading food chain, which starts with the green plants. So it is called as a grazing food chain. That is the primary producers and goes to the decomposers. So that is here the first one is the producers. Here the food chain which starts with the green plant. So it is called as a grazing food chain, and which goes to the decomposer and food. So here the detritus food chain through the herbivores and carnivores. So here second one is the detritus food chain, so which is found in the grassland ecosystem and forest ecosystem. So here the detritus food chain, which starts with the dead organic matter or fallen leaves, so so plants and animals, dead organic matter, and which goes to the decomposers and food chain through the herbivores and carnivores. So with grazing food chain and detritus food chain, if the food chain which starts with the producers, it is called as the grazing food chain, that is the plants, and whereas the detritus food chain which starts with the dead organic matter, that is the fallen plants or any dead organic matter of the animals. And so this is an example of grazing food chain, that is the producers to the primary consumers, to the secondary consumers and tertiary consumers. So next one is the food web. So that is the interlocking pattern of various food chains in an ecosystem, which is called as food web. So here many food chains are there, they are interconnected with each other. So in a food web, so many food chains are interconnected and where different types of organisms are connected at different trophic levels. So that there are number of opportunities for of eating and being eaten at each trophic level. So grass may be eaten by the insects or rats or deers, etc. And these may be again eaten by the carnivores like snakes, fox, or tiger. Thus, there is a interlocking of various food chains, which is called as the food web. So this green, that is the producer, which may be eaten by mouse, or rabbit, or goat. So this goat may be eaten by lion or jackal. Like that here, this rabbit, which may be eaten by the jackal or wild cat. Like that, so they are interconnected. So difference between the food chains and food webs. So in a linear food chain, if one species gets affected, it becomes extinct. Then the species in the subsequent trophic levels are also affected in the food chain. So generally in the food chain, if the one species gets affected or becomes extinct in the absence of that species, so all then the other different other levels also, other trophic levels also affected. But in a food web, if one species gets affected, it does not affect other trophic levels. That is, in the absence of the trophic level, that organism, so it can also dependent on the other one. So there are number of options which are available at each trophic level. For example, here in the green plants. So if this here the producers, they are eaten by this. Here it is eaten by the mouse. So if the mouse is absent, so it is also eaten by here. This mouse is absent, so uh, here this owl, it can also eat, they can also take the food as a rabbit. It can also feed the rabbit. So if only one food chain is there, if the mouse is absent or it may extinct, so the whole population may be affected. But in the food web, so if the one is absent, so it can also interconnected with the other one. So there are number of options which are available at each trophic level in the food web. So this is an example of a pond food chain. So next one is the significance of this food chain and food webs. So food chains and food webs, they play a very important role in the ecosystem. So energy flow and nutrient cycling, which taking place through them, through this food chains, and they mainly helps in the maintain and regulate the population size of the different trophic levels, and also helps in maintaining the ecological balance. So they have the property of biomagnification. So that is the non-biodegradable materials. They keep on passing from one trophic level to another. So at each successive trophic level, so the concentration is keeping on increasing. So this process, which is called as the biomagnification. That is, for example, if the poisons or any poisonous chemical which may increase, so it also affect the organisms also, all trophic level. So biomagnification. Okay, so next one is the ecological pyramids. So ecological pyramids, so that is the graphical representation of the structure and function of the trophic levels of an ecosystem, which starting with the producers at the bottom and successive trophic levels which forming the apex, which is known as the ecological pyramid. That is a graphical representation of these trophic levels. So in food chain, which starts with the producers to the consumers, so there is a regular decrease in the biomass and number of the organisms, since energy is lost, which as a heat in each trophic level. So it becomes progressively smaller near the top. So here ecological pyramids. So again, there are three types. That is a pyramid of number, pyramid of energy, and pyramid of biomass. So first one is a pyramid of number. That is a pyramid of number which can be used to show number of organisms at each stage of the food chain. So here that is here, for example, here the generally in the pyramid, ecological pyramids, the base which is always occupied by the producers. For example, here grasses, here 1 lakh. So 1 lakh grasses are there. But here the number of rabbits is less. So number of grasses are more. And only one fox is there. So here generally that is pyramid of number, that is here the more. So it is straight, upright pyramid. So it is called as an upright pyramid. And here the large number of producers are there when compared to the top carnivores, small number of top carnivores. So it represents the number of individual organisms which are present at each trophic level. So example is a grassland ecosystem. Generally in grassland ecosystem, the producers in the grassland ecosystem, that is the grasses, so which are in size and also in large numbers. So the producers occupy lower trophic level, that is more number of producers are there. When compared to the primary consumers, they are for example, they are rats and second trophic level. So since the number of rats are lower compared to the number of rats are less when compared to the grasses. The size is also small. So the secondary consumers, they are snake, for example, snakes, which occupy the third trophic level. And since the number of snakes are lower when compared to the rats. So the tertiary consumer, that is the carnivores, for example, eagles, which is the next trophic level, the number and size of the last trophic level, it is still small. So like that, the name grassland ecosystem, the pyramid of number, which is upright. So it is called as upright pyramid, that is more number of producers are there when compared to the herbivores, and less number when compared to the more number of herbivores when compared to the primary carnivores, and more number of carnivores when compared to the secondary carnivores. So like this, so it is upright in grassland ecosystem. So these are the upright pyramids. So here inverted pyramid of number, which is seen in the parasitic ecosystem or in a forest ecosystem. So it may be varies. So that is spindle shaped in forest ecosystem. So here the parasitic ecosystem, that is a producer. For example, here the first one is producer, that is on the large size tree, and which so more number of herbivores are there. And these herbivores parasites are more in number, and again hyper parasites are more in number when compared. They are smaller in size and more in number, so larger in number. So due to which here the pyramid of number is inverted pyramid of number, which is observed in the parasitic ecosystem. Whereas in the forest ecosystem, that is on the producers, so more number of herbivores, that is birds are more when compared to the carnivores. So due to which here the spindle shaped pyramid of number we can observe in the forest ecosystem. So general in grassland ecosystem, that is pyramid of number is upright. And here in aquatic ecosystem also, that is pyramid of number is upright, that is phytoplanktons, more number of phytoplanktons when compared to the small sized fishes when compared to the large, and like that. So here that is pyramid of number is inverted in parasitic ecosystem, and it is spindle shaped in forest ecosystem. So these 3 points are important here. And next one is the pyramid of biomass. That is the mass of tissue of the living organisms. That is a pyramid of biomass. It is a graphical representation of the biomass which is present in a unit area of various trophic levels. So it is shown the relationship between the biomass and trophic level, quantifying the biomass available in each trophic level. So the pyramid of biomass, which may be upright or inverted. So here we can observe the upright pyramid of biomass in the terrestrial ecosystem. For example, here the producer, the weight biomass is 1000 kgs and it is decreasing when it goes to the top. So herbivores biomass is when less. When compared to the primary carnivores, the herbivores is more like that. Here decreasing, biomass is decreasing when it is from the producer to the top carnivores. So here example for upright pyramid of biomass we can observe in the terrestrial ecosystem, and whereas in we can also observe the inverted pyramid in aquatic ecosystem. That is the producers. Here the number of producers may be more, but the biomass is less. And when compared to the herbivores, the biomass is more when compared to the producers. That is here the producers, here they only has a 4 grams per meter square. Whereas in herbivores, biomass is more when compared to the producers. So due to which here the inverted pyramid we can observe in the aquatic ecosystem. So these two are also important points. Upright pyramid we can observe, pyramid of biomass we can observe in the terrestrial ecosystem, and inverted pyramid of biomass we can observe in the aquatic ecosystem. So pyramid of biomass, it represents the total amount of biomass, that is the mass or weight of the biological material present in each trophic level. So that is here in the above figure, that is the decrease in the biomass from the lower trophic level to the higher trophic level. So this is due to because the trees are maximum in the forest, so which contribute the huge biomass. And the next trophic levels are herbivores and carnivores, and top of the trophic level which contains few tertiary consumers. So the biomass is also very less. So another one is the pyramid of energy. So this pyramid of energy, it is upright in all types of ecosystems. So this pyramid, which indicates not only the amount of energy flow at each trophic level, but also importantly, the actual role is the various organisms which play in the transfer of energy. So generally, a pyramid of energy, which shows how much energy is needed as it flows upward to support the next trophic level. So which is generally always there is a huge loss of energy in the form of heat. So here generally the pyramid of energy which is always upright. So this is about the 10% law here, the trophic levels, while transferring energy, that is from the primary producers to the primary consumers. So while transferring energy from the producers to primary consumers, here the 10,000 joules of energy is there. But when it is transferring to the primary consumers, only 1,000 joule. And from the primary consumers to the secondary consumers, here only the amount of energy which is taken by this secondary consumers are only 100 joules only. And from this secondary consumers to tertiary consumers, only here 10 joules. So while transferring energy from one trophic level to another, the amount of energy is lost in the form of heat. So it is called as the 10% law. That is, notice that only 10% is moved to the next level. So remaining amount of energy is lost in the form of heat or metabolic activities. So this is about the food chains, food webs, and ecological pyramids. So today we will discuss about the structure of the ecosystem. That is, what are the components? Main components are the biotic and abiotic components, and what is the function of the ecosystem. So I will stop here. In next class, we will continue. Any doubts?